This episode is brought to you by Deal. Managing a global team is complex. Deal makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance, all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deal to hire, pay, and manage teams worldwide. See how Deal works at deal.com/Adrian Tan to learn more. That's DEEL.com/ADRIANTAN. Deal, your forever people platform.
I wanted to, climb the corporate ladder as many of us wanted to do when we were young, hungry. I was very hungry, ready to do anything. Whatever the bosses, if there was a mission that was difficult with little resources and little time, I'll put my hand up and say, send me. I'm willing to put in the work and do whatever it takes. The passive income gives you choices, right? And the goal, you don't really need millions to retire. So a lot of people in Singapore think that 1 million is not enough, so expensive nowadays. We need 3, 4, 5 billion to retire. I disagree. I think that you only need a passive income of 3,000 to 5,000 Singapore dollars and you'll cover most of your basic expenses for most Singaporean households. You definitely don't need 4 or 5 million to retire.
Hello, Major Daniel Sim, sir. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you for having me.
Now, why I start with Major is because of your background, which I will want to jump into. But before that, help us to understand for people who are new to you. How do you normally introduce yourself?
I usually start by saying that I am a full-time father of 3 children. They are 11, 8, and 3. So I do try to spend as much time as I can with them because I've spent so many years working overtime and missing a lot of the precious moments growing up. But that said, I'm a property investor. I invest in properties in the UK. We buy, refurbish them, and we rent them out. One of the strategies I'm very passionate about is to rent them to social enterprises in the UK, and they provide homes for vulnerable tenants, asylum seekers, single mothers, and so it's kind of like a win-win. We provide a home at the same time get some passive income and rent from there.
I call you Major because you used to be an army regular. Help us walk through that journey. Firstly, maybe help us to understand what actually motivated you to sign on into the army to begin with.
Well, that's a funny story actually. My friends that have known me since I was young, perhaps even you or our listeners looking at me and they're like, what? Daniel is an army guy, totally don't look like. That's what. And when I first went on, all my friends, I used to be in a choir in Victoria School, in BJC. So when I signed on, everybody say, the choir guy, like Daniel signed on, like what's going on? So little did they know that, I signed on primarily because, then my dad was already pretty old. He was in his 70s. And I saw how hard he worked, as a taxi driver to bring my brother and I up. And I was kind of toying with the thought, should I sign on? Should I not sign on? Is that really what I want to do? But I think it was very, very providential in the end when they offered me a scholarship. One of the first things that I did was to take away the pains of paying the bills, right? Electricity bills and stuff at home. So I guess it was part of need, part wanting to provide for my family. And when I went to university, I was not just, given like an allowance. I was given a pay whilst I was studying. So I actually never really saw myself as a student. I saw myself as like being paid to study. So you better study and, make sure you do well. So when I was staying in hostel in NUS, I was in NUS Business School. So I would actually set an alarm, not to wake up, but to sleep. My friends look at me and say, this guy siao, like, how come he's like, I will be hanging out with them, maybe having supper, then my alarm ring already, then I go and sleep. Some of them joke like, call me Cinderella because alarm ring, then must go and sleep. But that was really how disciplined I was, and how seriously I took the scholarship and studying. That's really how I signed on. It was really because out of money, out of providing for the family, and actually signed on very close towards ORD. So I served almost then our time probably 2.5 years, right? Then towards finishing, then I signed on before I went to study. So yeah, that's a little bit of a backstory of how that happened.
So all in, you spent 10 plus 4 years?
I did 2.5
Yeah.
years. Then I went to study for 4 years. And then we did our vacation attachments. Everybody go on holiday break, but we'll go back and work, right?
Mhm.
And then after that, I served my 6-year bond in the SAF. Yeah. And I ended up, after studies, I was there for about 7 years because then they offered me a promotion, which I took up. And yeah, I finished my bond and then I decided to leave lah. Yeah, and I'm not sure how interested you are to hear about my motivations for that.
That's actually my second question,
Okay.
because I do understand the reason behind you leaving SAF is, well, it's a variety of reasons. You found yourself unfulfilled, time poor as well. You alluded to it earlier on during your introduction.
Yeah.
At which point did that realization kick in for you over that 7 years period?
That's a really good question. I guess when I was in uni, I mean, I was always quite an okay student, a bit nerdy throughout the years, not super fantastic. But I guess in business school, I started to really flourish. I think that's when I really found it came alive for me. So I was on the dean's list in business school. Yeah, doing really well. And in the 4th year, a group of us from NUS Business School we represented the school. We flew all the way to Washington, in the US, Seattle, Washington. And we took part in a case competition, right? So all the best business schools send their teams, then we go and compete and do a 48 hour. They give you a case for 48 hours, and then later you have to make a presentation to the senior management. And we prepared for all those cases, lots of boring cases like manufacturing companies, how to turn it around and all that. We were very lucky to get Starbucks because Starbucks was founded in Seattle, so that was really fun. And we actually emerged as champions. So then, I was very excited. I was like, oh, okay. And I was very interested in actually consulting. Yeah. So I was then thinking, oh, perhaps I could have a job in consulting, but then I had a bond to fulfill, right? So one of the consulting companies actually approached me. They were really keen to hire me, and through the interview process, they said, when can you start? Then I was like, oh, I got
7 years later.
right. I said, oh, but I got a small issue. I got a bond. I can't really start. And then they say, oh, don't worry about the bond lah. We will speak to HR and we will sort it out. I was like, huh? For real? Like, really, man? Then that was like on Friday, and then on Monday they call me back and say, oh, no, we don't have a policy of buying out bonds, at the entry level, unless you have a skill or a specialty, that we really want to grow in the company, which was true lah. So there I was, thinking that I was going to, of course it was firstly a decision, do I want to break my bond? I was very grateful for the scholarship. Otherwise, it would have been very hard to put myself through school. But here I was on one hand thinking, hey, maybe I could do what I was good at, consulting or wearing a suit and a jet-setting lifestyle. Little did I know, like a few weeks later, I was in a training shed in the rain, my clothes were all wet, and I was bitten by mosquitoes. Like back to reality lah, basically. But I think I really am very grateful for that experience that I had in the military. The first few years was a lot about finding myself. Then I must be in my early 20s, and I was first of all training officer cadets, and that was a very interesting experience of trying to fit into organizations. Yeah, because with my background and now I know my style of leadership, it wouldn't fit into, say, your incheck in the army lah. People and like scolding people. But at the same time, I guess as part of wanting to fit in, I was very, very harsh towards my trainees. Yeah, to the extent that some of them even wrote in feedback and gave me a feedback of like, how come his personality, like one moment he's so nice and the other moment he's a switchblade, and then he's like scolding us, punishing us. But I think that was, I apologized to them in the end lah. But I told them that it was also a journey to discover myself and to be secure in my own brand of leadership, which so instrumental. I mean, I wouldn't be here leading my own team in my own business, which we'll talk a bit more later, without all those initial pains and experiences. And then I think even before thinking about leaving, I was really thinking about how I can do well, because here I am so excited. I just graduated. I wanted to, climb the corporate ladder, as many of us wanted to do when we were young, hungry. I was very hungry, ready to do anything, whatever the bosses. If there was a mission that was difficult with little resources and little time, I'll put my hand up and say, send me. I'm willing to put in the work and do whatever it takes. Yeah. So I think year after year, I started to prove myself in the organization through different roles. And I think that's one of the beauty. I mean, for the listeners, I'm not sure the age group of your listeners, but those who are younger or might have kids that are thinking of signing on, I think that's great that they put us through different roles. I get to experience being in command, but at a very young age, and a lot of responsibility. We get to instructional tours. We get to train, because a big part of the army is training, either in those who are doing the NS or the reservist part of the house, and we get to do staff work in policy making. Yeah, so I was rotated around through the different tours. I think I did quite well. Like, I mean, you call me major when we first came in. So I got promoted the rank of major at age 30, which I think, I mean, I don't say this to Howlian or to boast, but I worked hard to get there, right? I'm grateful for bosses along the way who recognized that and rewarded me for that. But I also felt like it was like, I don't know, to use the army analogy that maybe guys in Singapore can relate to, right? It felt a bit like a 2.4 run. I mean, because the 2.4 and a 400-meter track is 6 rounds, right? So everybody knows how tiring that is. So for the first year I was there, then we run then you finish the first few rounds. Then the third, fourth, fifth rounds get a bit tiring, right? But then you feel like, okay, and that's how I felt in the third, fourth, and fifth years. I started to feel a bit tired from all the late nights, all the stretch assignments. If you want to do well, then you have to be given more, right? To really test whether you are, worth your salt, right? And I think this is the same in the private sector, not just in the public service. But it became like, wow, this year is an important year for you, right? So you better work hard. And then next year came, I mean, I'm not saying this specific to any organization, but bosses in general, organizations in general, whenever one day wake up and tell their employee, hey, this year not important for you, you don't need to work so hard. so it felt like the 2.4 run, right? On the fourth round, also need to run very fast. Fifth round also need to run very fast. Then sixth round need to run very fast. And it's a bit funny because I did 7 years. Then I ran back the sixth round, usually 2.4, we reached there, we're like, panting, and then we finished. But I finished my 6 years, but the race hasn't ended. You know what I mean? Like 7 years, oh, very good. Oh, go and run again. And I saw that this race, rat race as some people call it, never ends at 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. And with the students and the clients that I work with now, some of them have been running that race for 20, 30 years and are extremely burnt out and are continuing to race. And in fact, some people I spoke with somebody just yesterday and said that he's been working in the company for more than 20 years and he was just laid off like that so quickly. And I think in our current environment, unemployment is on the rise and all that. But back to your question, the point that I really started to know and question was, I guess, when my bond was ending. I think that is a natural decision, like, should I stay, should I leave? Initially, it was, for those who didn't know me, it was, and when people found out, it was almost like, wow, this guy not loyal to the organization, wow, he's thinking of leaving, which I really, really didn't like. Yeah. I am somebody who is very loyal. And when my loyalty is questioned with wrong, with little understanding of who I am or what my motivations are, I got triggered. Yeah. And to me, it's like, I can still be loyal to my country and my organization, and I can still leave. I can still serve in the reserves, and I still serve in reservists now as a NS commander as well. But to me, if you and for those who are thinking of designing a portfolio career or career transitions, in my honest opinion, there is nothing wrong to search. In fact, you must search, because if you can design only when you have considered options well, and if you say you decide to stay, then you're convicted of staying. You're convicted of your decision to stay or to leave, right? Whereas if you stay, on the other hand, I see a lot of people in organizations, and this is both in the public and private sector, who are very unhappy at work. And every tea break, every conversation that they have with their friends, Chinese New Year, what have you, and then they're complaining, wow, very sian, politics, this person got promoted, I didn't get promoted. And to me, it's like, you need to be convicted of your choice and know what value you bring to the organization, regardless where you're at. Sorry, I just rambled on because to me, it's a important point of decision that a lot of people just stay in their comfort zones. And I think whether you stay or you leave, you should be convicted of that.
Arrival of your kids may also have played a part in that decision as well?
Spot on to that, yeah. So I think for those of us who have kids, they have a huge impact in the way we see our lives. Suddenly you're responsible for a life in front of you, right? And a lot of soul searching at that point, I think. Yeah, like we all think and say that we are working hard for our kids, right? But I think there are a lot of parents. I know of a colleague who is he even calls it he even says and gives himself that term that I'm a weekend parent. Like somebody who looks after the kids the whole week, and then on weekends they come back home, so they only see the kids for twice a week. And it sounds really freeing and quite shook, but on the other hand, I also felt like that wasn't the kind of parent that I wanted to be. I started to really do more soul searching. Like everybody races, everybody tries to climb, but it started to dawn on me, like, what if my ladder is on the wrong wall? And I reached the top of the wall, and I'm like, gosh, right, I spent so much effort trying to climb up, so sweaty, so tired, and I didn't reach where I wanted to be. Yeah, it was, I mean, hand on heart, I do have huge respect for all the organizations I work for. I believe in the mission and what they do. Lots of good people do good work there. But we only have one life, right? People call it YOLO, right? You only live once. And some younger people take it to mean like, I don't know, jumping off planes, doing bungee jump, doing silly things, like, since you only have one life. But to me, if we only have one life, then we better get it right. You don't have a second chance to relive that again. And I guess that's what kind of motivated me. Did I know that I will be where I am today, with a business, and impacting so many lives and designing my career? I've worked from across the public service to the private sector to, doing freelance, working 3 days a week. Would I have known that I would have gone on that journey? No, but I only made each step. I could only see the next few steps, and I took that next step forward. And I guess life is a bit like that. You never really know the whole journey in front of you. It's the same like when we're driving a car, right? You cannot wait. Let's say you want to go from, I don't know, Changi to Jurong. You cannot wait for all the traffic lights to turn green at one go, and then you go, right? And I always think that's a great analogy, because you drive, and when traffic light turns red, you stop. When it turns green, you go. And I think that's how we just have to navigate life. Nobody has all the perfect answers or perfect information from the get-go.
And in life, there's no Google Map also. So you don't even know where to turn sometimes. You just have to think that, okay, I'm heading west, then this is west. Let me just continue down that direction.
Yeah.
And of course, you have gone through quite a number of changes and pivot along the way. You actually joined the civil service. You took a pay cut, understand that. Private sector took another pay cut, seems to have the propensity to take a pay cut. But I think importantly is then you landed on what you're doing right now, which is property investment. But I'm also quite certain it isn't the first thing that come to your mind, unless it is. What were some of your consideration when you were looking around or shopping for something that actually provide you with that passive income so that you could be more independent and be more time rich?
That's a really good question. I kind of saw it as like two parallel paths. One is like my professional career and my active income. So obviously that was my day job and what I used to be doing, right, with my military, in the military, and I was on board, and I did enjoy what I was doing. But perhaps I was thinking that maybe I don't want to do that like forever, because I started to look at my bosses. If I continue to work and I project a few years down the road, like asking myself really hard questions like, do I want to be like them, right? Because if I continue to hustle, and if given the right opportunities, maybe I might be in similar positions. And I saw the way that they live their lives and their schedules. And one day, one of my bosses scolded his PA. He said, "Why you schedule everything? I don't even have time to eat lunch." Then I was like, "Wow, quite poor thing. Both the boss quite poor thing and the PA also quite poor thing. Then another day, he told the same PA, like, this is urgent. Why you never schedule anything? You have to squeeze time into my schedule because I need to clear this paper, for example." Then the poor PA look at me, it's like, wow, one day he tell me he got scold me to eat lunch. The other one tell me that I need to squeeze time. And I guess that's just the reality, right? And I'm not saying this to take a jab at people who are living life like that. It is a struggle. Everybody is trying to do their best. But it became clearer and clearer to me that if I only live once, then perhaps I don't aspire to do that, right? Because
Mm.
yes, it's about money and growing up from a family, not born with a silver spoon. Obviously, being able to provide for my family was a big thing. And I guess that's the reason why I race and a lot of people, and why we chase the next promotion, the next pay raise. But I was quite clear, even from a young age, that that wasn't going to be the only track, right? Because there was something that I needed to build on the side, which is my passive income. Yeah, and how do I do that? I attended lots of courses. I went to lots of events. I tried lots of things. I mean, you name it, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you or the listeners have been to these events. One speaker after another goes up, and then one talks about options, one talks about stocks, one talks about forex. Back in the day, we didn't have crypto, but nowadays they talk about crypto. What have you? Like, I tried them all. I went for all those courses, and there were some days I made $2,000 in one day, and I felt over the moon. There were other days I remember on my honeymoon, my wife and I, because we tried to switch off our phones, and my wife used to be in legal, so she used to have this BlackBerry that she carries everywhere. In the morning, I haven't opened, like eyes are half open, and the BlackBerry starts to flash that little red dot, and her stress levels will rise. So we said, we pakat lah. We say, hey, this is our honeymoon lah. We don't want to be, glued to our phones, right? So we put our phones and we locked it in the locker. And then when I came back after a day, right, I lost $15,000 in an options trade gone wrong. So, like, I started to realize that I needed to find something that suited my temperament a bit more, right? Not just be so glued to my phone. Like in the morning when I wake up, so panicked, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Where we invested money, significant amount of money, and we're very concerned now. Like next morning, did it go up 5%, or if it drops 20% in a few short days, then we are very moody, very grumpy, and a lot of regret. So that kind of like roller coaster of emotions, yeah. And I wanted to really find something that is more predictable, more boring, but at the same time makes my money grow and work a bit harder lah. So it's not so much that I, did all these transitions and then eventually stumbled upon property. I was doing that in parallel. Yeah. So I stumbled upon property. I mean, I made all these mistakes, and I looked at all these different options to grow my wealth. And when I finally found property to work well, and by property I meant I first invested in a property in Malaysia, because that sounded so good lah, right? It's going to be built up. You're going to get a developer's discount. We went into a room full of strangers, and they said, "Oh, you're quite young. You can take the loan. Come, I introduced you to somebody else. They are also looking to buy property, and they are older, right? They got capital. So you all should go and work together and buy the property." And it sounded so good lah, right? I say, okay, like sounds like a good idea. We do it, then at least I don't need to come out with so much money. We can share the property. One of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my whole life. Yeah, I've literally lost more than hundreds of thousands of dollars in that deal. Yeah. Because, and that's why I always tell my students, never go into joint ventures with strangers. Don't buy new built properties, because they're way overpriced, compared to the surrounding properties that are there. But that said, I'm telling you this because it's not like I stumbled into found property, then wow, it's like all rainbows and butterflies and everything. The life was beautiful after that. But it was on both tracks, it felt like a struggle. Yeah, it felt like I didn't really know what I was doing. All I had was my belief that, I am one idea away from a breakthrough, all right, or I'm one move away from a breakthrough. And that kept me going, even in the times where I couldn't really see very clearly, or when I was very disappointed, or, when things didn't go well. Yeah, and from that experience, then I stumbled into a UK property investing opportunity, and that's what I continued to build on the side. And as my passive income grew, initially $500, $1,000, $2,000, that allowed me to design this other track, which was my active income, and to take pay cuts along the way, which you mentioned earlier, without a huge dent to my living expenses or my lifestyle. Yeah, on the outside, people think, "Oh, Daniel, see how I keep taking pay cuts, along the way." But it's like, initially, active income is very high, I think, for most people, working in jobs or, as a freelancer. And the passive income is quite low lah. But as I grew my passive income, then I could slowly adjust my active income. right? And that's how I kind of balance and grew both tracks along the way over the last, I think, 10, 15 years.
So currently, what's the weightage like of your income from passive and on active bid? And on active bid, other than of course, working on your investment, what else are you doing as well?
The main thing is to grow the passive income to a level where it covers most of one's basic expenses. So we have grown it such that it covers that. And then along the way, as you know, I got more kids beyond the first kid. And kids in Singapore are expensive, right? And my daughter wants to learn singing, and the singing classes are so expensive. My son wants to do drumming, and we try to, just support them to explore their passion areas. So what we did along the way is to grow the passive income, such that because the standard of basic expenses started to go up. Yeah. And at the same time, in terms of I guess active income, yes, I continue to grow my property portfolio, right? We're continuing to be active in the market. And I think it's sometime in the midst of COVID, lots of friends and family, because everybody stay at home, they don't know what to do. And sometimes I post on social media about my property investments, my journey in that. This is a property I bought, and it generates us 6 to 8%. It was only we bought a freehold terrace house in the UK for, less than £100,000, like less than 200,000 Sing. And most people are like, what? A terrace in the UK for less than 200,000? Like, how does it work? And they start to DM me and say, hey, teach me then, how do you do it? Because the properties in Singapore are so expensive and still all the cooling measures are pay BSD and all this. So a lot of people started to reach out to me and were quite interested to learn. And one of my mentors started to, nudge me and say, hey, then, maybe you should start sharing what you know. You're probably the only one in Singapore with that amount of experience. It's really niche in what we do, buying existing properties in the UK, refurbishing it, renting it out, some of that on long contracts. Because so many Singaporeans, Malaysians are making mistakes in property investments. I think recently we also saw the new launches sell like 90+% in just a day or a weekend. One of my friends who was an estate agent, he sent me a picture of how crowded the whole show flat was. And then we were joking. It's like, hey bro, free this one. Like, people buy like, because it's free. And if it's for their own stay, well and good, right? But a lot of people are buying it in the thought that maybe I'm going to rent it out. It's so near MRT or amenities and collect rent lah. But they don't realize that the rent can't even cover the mortgage. So in reality, they're making a loss and they're just hoping that the value will go up. Which, on some projects, yes, it does go up. Or many other projects, it didn't go up and some even went down. So, hope isn't a great strategy. And so in the midst of COVID, we started to, run web classes to teach people. And to my surprise, there were a lot of people who were also interested in stable returns. Not looking to 10x their money through crypto. I think a lot of them got burnt, in stock markets or investments gone wrong, and they just want to plan for their retirement or provide for their kids to go to uni in a way that's very stable lah. Maybe they saved up a pot of money, a couple of 100,000, and they are faced with that difficult decision. Do I fund my kids to go to uni? And after that, everything go down to zero because all the 20, 30 years of savings? Or do I keep that money and ask them to maybe study locally lah, don't go overseas? Then I have a little bit left for my retirement. Yeah, a lot of my students are in that kind of dilemma. And I say, actually, you can do both, right? You can use the money to buy assets that generate the income. And let's see if one of our students did that in 2 to 3 years. They have about 5,000 passive income a month, Sing dollars. And it's quite cute. In her case, it worked out really well because her kids are 2-3 years apart. So the first one go there and then he can live off the income, right? Pays for their accommodation and living expenses. Then the second one go to uni, and the first one is almost going to graduate. So that passive income provides for the second one. And then when all the kids are graduated, the passive income then funds their retirement. At the same time, the money that was used to buy the asset has been growing in value. The rents are also growing in value. So for most people, once they pay for their kids' uni, the money all go down to zero lah, because spend finish already ma. But I help them to restructure and think of how to invest it such that they live off the income, but at the same time, the pool of money doesn't go down, it continues to grow. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but I think the main point is that the passive income gives you choices, right? And the goal, you don't really need millions to retire. So a lot of people in Singapore think that 1 million is not enough, so expensive nowadays. We need 3, 4, 5 million to retire. I disagree. I think that you only need a passive income of 3 to 5,000 Singapore dollars, and it will cover most of your basic expenses for most Singaporean households. If you live frugally lah, I'm not saying every day go and eat Michelin star restaurant, right? But you can eat cai peng lah, right? Can survive. Then of course, if they want to, they can grow it further from there lah. And you probably need a pot of maybe less than $500,000 or plus minus. You definitely don't need 4 or 5 million to retire.
For someone to receive 5,000 per month kind of dividend or income, how much would this person have to invest into properties already in order to get that 5,000 a month?
It depends on the strategy that they are looking at. For us, we teach 3 different strategies. But to simplify it, if it's just a typical house that you buy and you let out to the UK, they can get started for say 50 to 70,000 Sing. That can get them a freehold flat, maybe somewhere in Scotland, and buy in cash. Okay, generate maybe 6 to 8% returns. Yeah, so that's the kind of how much they need to get started, and that will generate maybe about 500 per month in returns.
Yep.
More advanced strategy where they rent it out by the room, and that's called houses of multiple occupation, or we call it HMO. Maybe they need about 120 to 150k Sing as capital, and they can get lending in the UK. And net of all expenses, they will generate about say 1,000 Sing a month. Yeah, which is why I was saying, say for a 500 to 600,000 Sing, they would be able to generate. Of course, there are some assumptions there. They need to have the right knowledge, of how to find these, what I call Golden Goose properties to start with. They need to have reliable teams on the ground to be able to manage them effectively. How do you structure it? How do you, what are the tax implications? How to get lending if they're older? So these are things that I cover on our web classes, which we probably don't have time to dive into today. But yeah, I would say for the average Singaporean who have been working hard for 20, 30 years, most of them will be able to do that over time.
I know this guy, he was doing recruitment way before me, 10 years before me, and he told me there was a pivotal moment in his life. That was when he received another year of profit and was deciding, should I invest everything back into my recruitment business, or should I take half and invest into property? He decided on the latter and did that, and he said that was his life-changing moment. So right now he owns many property in Singapore. He also went into UK. His property listing is so solid. Got website one, and then he lists out all the property, and it was very heavy into UK.
Right.
So he made a lot of money. When you talk about property investment, passive income, UK, you put all these 3 keywords into one sentence. It is very hard to ignore that. Is this a scam? Because a lot of people would think that way, and I think a lot of us have also seen cases, I think profitable plots, if I'm not wrong, and the likes of those kind of stuff. It would just remind people of, I think I've seen something like this. How, maybe before we touch on yours, could you also help to PSA and help people to understand how to spot the legit one?
We do run free webinars, and a lot of our students, when they come through, and those that work closely with us, they also, when they see maybe my YouTube channel or they see me posting on LinkedIn, they would say, their first thought is like, is this for real? Is this a scam, as you say, right? And I think because Singaporeans in general, first of all, been around, and there's so many of these self-proclaimed fake gurus in the market, right? So how then do you differentiate that? I would say the first thing is to spend some time to attend whatever their web class is. And I think quite quickly you'll be able to tell whether this person really knows their stuff, or they are just making it up as they go. How experienced are they in it? That's what I would say. So I think having some background, some track record is important. A lot of people have done it for say 1 or 2 years, all right, or they bought a few properties, not more than say 3 to 5 years, and then they go around and self-proclaim that they are gurus, right, and teaching everybody how to do it. And I think that's quite scary, because 2 to 3 years is a really short time. They have not had an experience of what happens if another Brexit happens, what happens if there's another next economic recession, we've come through a period of time where interest rates are really high. How does that then impact your investments? So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is are they, for a lot of people who are promoting new build properties, right? Like, do they have skin in the game? Do they also put their monies where their mouth is, right? A lot of them are there then to perhaps as estate agents to chase a commission. But, and that's where the wealth is made, right? It's through people buying and then they're getting commissions. So I think I look for people who are actively living out or executing the strategies that they are teaching. Yeah. So that's the second thing I would say. And the third thing, I mean, I can't really. This third one is a little bit more subjective. I guess the what really shines through is how authentic is that person, right? Or are they just a personality that is for the online space? And what I love about your podcast, Adrian, I watched your YouTube channel and then follow your posts. Like talking to you now is like I see your channel. It's like exactly the same person. I reckon if we meet face to face and have coffee, have a similar chat as well. And that's my reminder to myself, like whether people see me online or on YouTube or you bump into me on the street, I'm just who I am now, like it or not, right? This is just me. And these are my beliefs. And if people vibe with that, they resonate with that, great. If they don't, that's fine, and I think people have, and I think podcasts are great as well, right? Because when people listen to a podcast that are like, 40, 45 minutes, it cuts through the fluff, right? You can position nicely and choose the best parts and make it into a 1 or 2 minute short form video. But people's like, I want to see the real deal. Tell me about, your childhood, what your decision making. And I think they are really looking to get a sense of what your values are as a person and do they resonate with that. So I think, what you're doing is amazing. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity to share this as well.
Why specifically UK? What is some attributes of UK that make it so interesting for you to prioritize and focus on it?
Yeah.
I mean, we can of course easily see that, it's an English-speaking country, but then Australia also English-speaking country. Why not Australia?
A lot of people think in Singapore we love to go holiday in Australia. They think it's a bit nearer. Or why not JB? Why not other places that people think about, like why UK? I think the first reason is the lingua franca is important. So, but like you said, there are other countries that speak English. But when I bought my property in Malaysia, everything I got was in Bahasa. I don't even know how to read a single word. I had to go and translate it. But that aside, there are other countries that are English speaking. Second thing I would say is the law is important. So Singapore law is modeled after UK law, right? So we can write a contract on paper and that's enforceable in court. I think that's important to protect your assets. The most important reason I would say is it depends on what your end goal, your strategy is, and does that location, is it able to meet that strategy? So for me and my wife, it was really clear that we wanted to grow more passive income so that then we can reduce our active income, in the job side of things. So, for all the other exciting things like, there's new developments, government is pumping money in the area, developer is going to raise prices soon. To me, all these are noise. The question is, if I rent it out, can the rent cover its mortgage and other outgoing costs? And I started to my surprise, 90% of countries and properties in the world don't even meet this basic criteria. I call it a cash flow litmus test. The rent minus your mortgage must give you some profits. Yeah. So that's the first thing I think. And I look in the UK and say, hey, actually it can. The second criteria I look at is, can the ordinary person on the street buy or rent this property? Yeah. So a lot of people, when they think of the UK, they think of like, maybe Canary Wharf, or you look in Australia, they look at the city centres. The issue is Canary Wharf and these properties, through Singaporean lenses, it looks cheap lah. Maybe £600,000, maybe about $1 million Sing. And when we are buying 500-600 square feet new built condos for 1.5 mil, then we see, Canary Wharf got apartment there, for only 1 mil Sing, very cheap, right? But it's not just about cheap, right? Price is one thing, but what's the value? And a lot of people who are living there are going to be expats or, people working in the city. But actually, when you think about it, it's quite common sense. Even in Singapore, when you go to, say, Raffles Place MRT, right? If you just stand there in the morning rush hour, just look at the number of people coming out in the trains. It gives you the idea that majority of people who work there don't live in the city center, right? And that is the same, right? If you go to the UK, you go to all the big financial cities, it's the same. Majority of locals who work there don't live smack in the city center. But very funny, Singaporeans as property investors, we have this obsession buy in city center is safer. You know what I mean? So that's where common sense maybe is not so common. And then which is why this ordinary properties for ordinary people thing is great. And I think the majority of people in the UK actually live in houses rather than flats. And the houses there, if you don't look in London in itself, you can buy one for like £100,000 or less. Why then would I buy a tiny flat for £300,000 or £400,000? Right. So that's where I started to see a real value. I started to dive deeper in there. I would say these are a few reasons to why the UK really stood out for me. And to me, it's about going where the strategy works. Passive income works there. Then I can use that passive income and design my lifestyle anywhere in the world. Right? It can fund. Some of my students think my kids are going to uni, right? Either in uni, UK or anywhere, and then they think, wow, rent's so expensive. Maybe I should buy a place, and then so that I can save money on rent. And when they graduate, they can sell the property, hopefully got capital appreciation. So sounds logical at first glance. It's a very Singaporean investor mindset, right? Buy, hopefully got capital appreciation. But I told them that, hey, why don't you just buy a property where you can get the best bang for your buck in terms of returns and rentals, and with the cash flow that you're getting, you can stay anywhere you want, right? In the UK, most times people stay firstly on campus, and after that they move out. You can rent the best Airbnb, right? And after that, in your retirement, you can travel anywhere. It's about, I think we have shifted from a ownership to a consumption lifestyle, right? In the past, we used to, I think you and I am for sure, I think we're about similar age group. We used to love our Discman and our Walkman and all that, right? We used to buy our CDs to listen to our music. But nowadays we just stream it on Spotify. I don't own the music, right? But it's the same for property. You don't need to own the property to live in it or for your kid to live in it. All you need is to have income, and then you have flexibility and freedom to design your life anywhere.
Are there still opportunity for people who are still thinking of or just about to jump into the game?
Certainly. It is about knowledge, right? Because if you don't have the right knowledge, the opportunity could be sitting right in front of you. They could be walking past a Golden Goose property on their way to the supermarket every day, but they didn't realize the opportunity is there. And I think it's for us, right? Singaporean, looking at Singaporean lenses, we look at it and we say, wow, so cheap. How come the locals don't just buy it themselves? That's a question I commonly get. But we realize that we got a lot of things going for us here that is not the same in other countries. When we start working here, we get, subsidized housing in the form of HDBs. We get HDB loan, even though from the first day you start working, you show them your payslip, they will grant you a loan at low interest rates. Culturally, a lot of us stay with our parents until we get married. It could be in our 30s or whatever. In the UK, it's totally different, right? They go to school. First of all, they move out of homes early, right? As early as 18 or even younger. And obviously at the age they can't buy, so they need to rent. They go to uni and when they graduate, they're saddled with tens of thousands of university debt. They got no credit profile. Lenders will not lend them a single cent until they have built that credit profile. So it takes them many years of working to even get to a state where a lot of Singaporeans from the get-go can already buy a property and hopefully make money in our HDB, right? We got so many HDB millionaires. So I think that's a huge difference why the locals are not just jumping in to do it. Another reason is, as Asians, we are good savers, and we're looking at people, a lot of our students are, say, in their 50s or 60s, and they have worked many years and they have saved up a significant pot, right? So it's very different for somebody in the UK who may not have such good financial habits and have not saved up this pot. I mean, I'm just comparing the ordinary person on the street, right? The equivalent of our strategy, I would say, is like, if you can buy 10 HDBs here, ordinary properties for ordinary people, because 90% of Singaporeans stay in HDBs, right? And rent it out. Wouldn't that be great? Because any day of the week, you'll be able to find tenants, because HDB is, much easier to rent out than, say, a unit at the sale at Marina, which is smack in the city center. Tiny room, it costs way more. In the UK, there isn't that restriction, because the ordinary property for ordinary people are flats, terrace houses, and not the very expensive flats. So there's a huge supply of good opportunities there, and not everybody is seeing the demand for that. Yeah. Back to your earlier question on why the UK is great, it's also in terms of lending, and people don't realize that. In Singapore and in Malaysia, like, the older we are, the shorter the term of the loan, because they only lend you up to 65 years old. And the shorter the loan tenure, the more expensive the mortgage payments. Then bo hua already lah. You see the rent come in 4,000-5,000. Wow, the mortgage on a 1.5 million property is 8 to 12K. It's like straight away, yeah, you don't need to be great at math to know it doesn't add up, right? But in the UK, for those who are in the know, right, and know maybe people who are working, specializing in lending for foreign nationals, then there are opportunities to get lending. My oldest student is 76 years old, and they can still get lending. So to me, that's incredible, right? Because you definitely can't do that in Singapore. Simply because in the UK, they look at lending based more on the asset and the income that the asset can generate, rather than on the borrower and how old they are, how much income they are earning. Because I think the lenders here also know that if you buy a property in Singapore, it's not going to cash flow. That's where the age and how much you earn becomes important, because they know that every month the property is making a loss. They need your salary to top up the difference to pay them the bank mortgage. That's why it becomes important.
How much of time are you spending on a daily basis? Describe to us what's your typical work day like.
I wake up, my boy goes to primary school, so I send him to school, and then I go for a walk in the morning, because our fellow business owners or entrepreneurs or portfolio workers can relate to, like, if you start working, sometimes you don't stop because you left your job, right, previously, and you start working for a maniac with yourself. And those of us who are very driven, just work non-stop lah. So I think since the start of last year, I started to have a routine of going for walks in the morning, just to have a bit more wellness, take care of my health a bit more. No longer a young chicken, right? So I start to feel the effects of how I used to be working so hard, in the last 10-15 years. Yeah, so that's what I do. I go for a walk. I'll go to a cafe for a cup of my favorite coffee. I might do some reading. I might catch up, do some posting on LinkedIn, where I'm quite active for the last 6 months or so, and I know you're very active there as well. Then I might do a coaching call with one of my students. And then thereafter, I would play pickleball with my wife. We started playing pickleball about 6 to 8 months ago, and that's something we really enjoy. Then I would pick my son up from school. We will have lunch together, and then the rest of the afternoon might be responding to my students' queries, checking in with the team. Then, yeah, I try to finish work by, say, 6 p.m. on most days. And this is deliberate, and it's something I would recommend for all freelancers or portfolio workers to really start to draw some hard boundaries. Otherwise, work just never ends. And for so many years, I worked a full-time job, and then I had dinner, and then I worked till midnight, and then the next day starts again. And I just got so burnt out, burning the candle on both ends, which is why I kind of design. I feel like if I can put in 2 to 3 hours of real quality work in a day, that would have been a great day, rather than 5 to 7 hours of like half quality kind of work, and it feels like a drag. Yeah. So I find that a great book that I read was about managing our energies and not just managing our time. So I do my creative work in the mornings, because that's when I feel best, and then I do my routine type work in the afternoons, if that helps. Yeah. And then maybe like one night a week, I do a night call, which is a group coaching with our students who are on our program.
Given that your property are in UK, do you also have to stay late just to accommodate to the timing for, I don't know, maybe speak with the people there? Do you even have a team managing your stuff over there?
We do have teams of people in the UK, people to find tenants, collect rent. If there's something that needs fixing in the property, they would do it. So they take care of all that, so that we don't have to stay up late to deal with stuff like that. We don't want to build a portfolio, then have people calling you in the middle of the night. Hello, the light bulb spoiled. Then jialat lah, even though So I think there's some work involved. Some people say, how passive is this passive income? Do you really need to put in work? I would say, yeah, for everything in life, they need to put in some work and effort. Otherwise, if it's so easy, everybody will be financially free, right? So I think the big part is learning the knowledge, and there is work involved to get the property up and running, right? In terms of finding the right property, liaising with the teams. But most of that can be done via email, right? So that's pretty easy. Singaporeans are good at email anyway. Then once the property is up and running and rented out, that's when I think it becomes really passive. Maybe you get one email a month from the letting agents in the UK telling you the rent has come in. Maybe there was some maintenance needed on the property. You just take a quick look at the email, 1 or 2 minutes. If it's more or less in order, then great, enjoy the income. I think there was one night I was changing my kids' diapers at 3 a.m. I checked my phone and I saw that one of these emails had come in, right? Landlord statements. And that's when it really hit me that, this is really what it means to have assets working for us, and we don't need to trade our time for money. You could be doing anything, you could be anywhere in the world. Here I was at 3 a.m. changing diapers, and our assets were working hard for us. And I think that's when it became real, right? Otherwise, it just sounds like an idea. It sounds like a nice idea, but when your first property, the first Golden Goose property sends you your first landlord statement, then that's real, right? And then I think something really shifts within at that point.
When I started selling a digital course, when the first Stripe transaction came in, I'm like, hey, wow, feels very different, especially when I was only watching Netflix. That was around 10 p.m. and suddenly I got that notification. It does feel very surreal, and I'm glad to know that within the property space and for Singaporeans, especially given that you're based here, this is actually a dream that people can still pursue. Granted, there are some black sheeps, but I'm sure, as Daniel has mentioned here, there are ways for you to discern the good ones from the bad ones. And just take note that just because there are bad actors out there doesn't mean you should throw everything and the baby out with the bathwater. And with that, thank you so much for coming onto the show. I learned so much from your conversation today. I hope this could go on for a few hours more. And like you said, more than happy to catch up with you in person to discuss more. For people who may be keen to learn more about your strategy, the Golden Goose, yourself, where can they go to?
I'm very active on YouTube, so they can search up my YouTube channel, Golden Goose Property UK. They can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search up Daniel Sim and they'll be able to find me. Or they can go to our website, goldengoosepropertyuk.com.
You also have an email address that you gave me here, and I really like the domain. I'm not sure, can I share the domain? bornpoordierich.com. Is that a website?
That's our, our company, but we are probably better known with our brand called Golden Goose Property. But there's a story behind that. Some people look at this and like, die rich for what? You also cannot bring your Ferrari with you. But I think for me, I'll keep this short by a little bit of a background behind that is there are people that are born wealthy with a golden spoon or silver spoon, and they end up and we also know of people like me who were born with nothing and end up doing good in life, right? I think many people who are like that. So to me, it's about what we do or we don't do in between that makes all the difference. Yeah, so I think that really inspired me. That's why we had that domain, Born Poor Die Rich.
And probably the difference could be found at your seminar, which I'll put into the show notes for people to learn more, as well as yourself. So thank you once again for coming onto the show. Lovely speaking with you.
Appreciate it, Adrian.